Hello, everyone. This is your girl, Michelle, with Girls Talk Real Talk, because when girls and guys talk, information is disseminated. I am so excited about tonight. Tonight, I get the opportunity to share my platform with some awesome individuals. And we are really going to get into the conversation of what took place at the Capitol on Wednesday. And in that conversation, we're going to talk about what it looks like for individuals of color. And as being individuals of color, the direction that we need to go in to begin to have these conversations to find the solutions that are going to work in our community to make sure that we understand that nobody is going to save us. We have to save ourselves. And in saving ourselves, that means we come up with viable solutions that are going to help us be able to navigate in the world in which we live today. So without any further ado, everybody knows who I am. I've been doing this a little bit, so everybody knows who I am. So I'm going to give an opportunity for those that are a part of my panel to introduce themselves. So I am going to start with the only gentleman that is in the group. And let me see. I'm going to try to get this right. Nah, I'm not going to try it.
Ibrahim.
Bruh.
Hey, my name is Ibrahim Tanner. I'm the president of ADOS Indy. It stands for American Descendants of Slavery. It's a lineage political group that's hankered in data and advocates for reparations to the 35 million Black Americans who can tie their roots back to Jim Crow and slavery.
Okay. So if individuals want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
You can reach me on any social media platform at Ibrahim Tanner, at heydosindy.com as well.
Okay. Welcome to the platform. So I'm going to switch over to Ericka. Ericka, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Good evening, Michelle and audience. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm Ericka Sallee. I am the owner of True Synergy. It's a personal and professional development coaching company. And as a result of those programs, I help my clients to figure out what barriers get in the way of us being the best version of who we were meant to be. So this conversation is definitely one that I am excited about. And to get in touch with me, I think you can see it running at the bottom of the screen, but in case you do not, it is truesynergy.org. You can also contact me at truesynergy@comcast.net, and I too am on all the social media platforms, which you can find from my website. That's probably the easiest way to get it all out there.
Okay, but last but not least, definitely not least, we are going to have Karen introduce herself.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me, and I'm thrilled to be on this panel. My name is Karen Nance. I am a writer, an attorney, private investigator. My passion is restorative justice, and I have been a facilitator in the prisons. I work in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my contact information is Karen Nance, www.karennance.com. And my email address is at the bottom of the screen. It's karenfelicianance@gmail.com. And thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so very much, guys, for coming on and for deciding to be a part of our show tonight. I want to get right into it. But I don't want to waste too much time. But as we know, it was probably more watched event than regularly scheduled programming, because I think that all got cut off in the midst of what's going on. So we do know that there was an attack on the Capitol building. The reason that I decided to call this the attack on the democratic process is because of the intent of what I'm calling domestic terrorists, what their intent was when they broke into the Capitol on that particular day. The intent was to get to those certified documents and to destroy them so that Joe Biden could not be certified as the next president of the United States. That was the intent. There were some events that led up to that has been very polarized and popularized by the media. And a lot of that has to do with conversations that were going on prior to the actual event. And so I want us to talk about that conversation. I did not witness the conversation live. I saw it on video afterwards. And as you know, President Trump made a speech to his supporters that were protesting the certification process. I'll say it that way. And so in his speech, he said that they were going to walk down to the Capitol. And he goes on and he says a few other things. And then he says that they have to take the system back, as if we had lost it as Americans or something. And not only that, but he implied that it had to be taken by force, was the only way that they're going to take it. And so, to me, now this is my opinion, to me, I felt like the comments that he made were insightful. And I don't say insightful in meaning that they were great and wonderful and made me think. They were insightful because they created frenzy. And it created action that was centered around violence and destruction. So what did you guys think when you heard about that video or saw the video of the speech that he made?
Yeah, Michelle, if I could jump in, one of the things that I've been thinking about, really even before Wednesday, but I guess Wednesday was the culmination of a lot of different things that we've seen over the course of this presidency. But I want to say it this way. I kind of want to set this up because anybody watching this might say, oh, this is a group, the panel, they're anti-Trump or whatever the case may be. This is bigger than that. And so I just want to kind of preface my answer to your question with that. What I will say is this whole entire political arena that we've been in is pretty much what I call the case study for a number of different human behaviors and the social awareness. So when I respond to your question, the first thing that I started thinking about was all of this is a demonstration around fear, right? Fear that something is being taken away, or fear that if someone else gets this election or this whatever, you can probably fill in the blank with a number of other things, then that means it's something taken away from me. And so I immediately started hearing the words fight, take back. And those are words that you're right. They do incite a certain type of behavior, because when we think about human behavior, the need to fight means I've got to lash out, I've got to defend, I've got to protect my territory, however you define that. And so those words mean something. And as we see what it meant, and I think people miss the fact that when we say things, especially when we're leaders, those words do matter. So I kind of, I took on that same perception that you did. Like, those words are strong, they're powerful, they rise up in our consciousness and our sense of awareness in a way that causes us to lash out. The impact of that is traumatic and deadly in this case.
Yes.
I think Trump has always had a way of talking to his base and making them feel like they are the most essential part of America, and America owes them something. to me, like we've kind of normalized his white supremacy rhetoric, and I believe most of America just viewed it as, just Trump being Trump again until, people ended up at the Capitol building. And I was watching on CNN today, and they said legally it would be extremely hard to prosecute him because these are things he's always said, and he didn't specifically use language that could be directly pinpointed to as far as inciting a riot, even though he did in the middle of his speech tell people to, walk down to the Capitol building and, like we're going to have to, take this government back. But to me, it was just normal Trump rhetoric. The only difference was how the crowd reacted. And that's it.
Okay. I appreciate the comments of Ericka and Ibrahim, because I agree. The other thing that I think came into play is the fact that uh, Trump has not dealt with any of the serious issues of our time in a responsible manner. And the fact that so many people have lost their jobs and lost their lives due to COVID, I think that he played into that fear as well. And so people are angry and they want to strike out against somebody. And Trump has made the rest of us be the subject of that. And so he had an audience that was ripe for violence, ripe to incite and to express their frustration. It doesn't look like COVID's going to come to an end anytime soon. And I think that his presidency and his response to that crisis in and of itself has caused people to not act responsibly from with regard to their health, period. And so we have a situation where things are escalating, and he's very astute in knowing how to get his audience to respond. And I believe that that's what culminated into Wednesday's incident. And unfortunately, I don't think it'll be the end of it. I believe he said today that he wasn't going to go to the inauguration of Joe Biden.
I think one of the things, and as a writer, not just a host, but also a writer, I pretty much began doing my research, looking at this from a different perspective, because I was angry. When I tell you, when I saw it, I was pissed off. And I was like, you people really? You really gonna do this? And then the other thing that came to mind is that if anybody that looked like me tried that, I mean, think about it. A few years ago, there was a Black woman, and although she was a mental health patient, she believed that the president was speaking to her because she was hearing his voice in her head. And she attempted to drive into the Capitol building in order to get to the president so that she can finish this conversation that she's been having with him in her head. She got as far as the gate before they shot and killed her. And so, I mean, we're talking very responsibly, and we're talking very simply about the issue, but the issue is a little bit deeper than this, because it shows the difference that is being made between two different groups of people. You have the haves and you have the have-nots. And when we are looking at this, we have to seriously look at it from a perspective of, this may be Trump's norm, but it cannot be continued acceptable behavior. Absolutely. Cannot. Because sometimes somebody is going to have to pull his coattail, and he's going to have consequences for his actions. And because if we don't, then what? He's going to continue on with it. And then somebody, from what CNN said last night when I watched it, there were 4 people that died as a result of that. You had the one woman that was shot and killed. And then you had 3 people that died due to injuries that they sustained during the siege. And although they died later, it was still a direct result. And so in my research, I had found out about, and I put it in my notes, so I made sure I brought it up. There is a thing called joint enterprise. And in joint enterprise, it states that if you help or encourage someone to commit an offense, you can be just as guilty as the other person and held accountable for their actions. And so as I am looking at this and as I am dealing with every aspect of what this is, one of the things that I am finding is if I would have done it, there would have been a different standard that I would have been held to.
Michelle,
Then since he did it.
I'm the only one who can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on one second. Can you hear now, Ericka? Okay, those of you that are watching, let me know if you are able to hear us okay, because I don't want anyone to miss out. So, let me know if you hear me? Now I can hear your video. I can hear your audio, Ericka.
Actually, I don't. Can you hear me? I'm just watching it from the.
Yes, I can hear you, and I can hear your audio.
Okay, so I'm chiming in from the live Facebook feed, so I'll just. Okay, perfect.
Okay. So in the midst of what it is that we are talking about and the direction that we're going to go in this is for us to understand that regardless of what it is that we are dealing with, we have to be held accountable for our actions. You have to. There's no way for us to get around it. In the midst of what it is that we're doing, one of the things that I found when I was doing my research and I came upon this joint enterprise theory, the one thing that stood out to me was if a common person that is not the president of the United States can be held accountable for the actions of another individual because of their influence on making that individual act out in a certain way, why is it that the president of the United States is not held to the same standard? Influence on making that individual act.
Well, there's no reason why the president should not be held. He should be held to a higher standard. And so there are a lot of factors that come into play. And the most obvious, the most blatant is race. We're talking about someone who has espoused superiority in more than one way. And just his actions with regard to what happened in Portland and in other cities that have had peaceful demonstrations, and his response to quash the right to free speech. He's done that. And it's difficult to be, I don't want to say impartial, but to be subjective or objective because it's so subjective. And you ask the question, what standard should he be held to? Obviously, even if he weren't held to a higher standard as a president of the United States, as a common everyday citizen, his behavior is abominable. And so it's very difficult to deal with the repercussions, which he probably will not ever have to deal with because of his stature in terms of his wealth and connections and that type of thing. So it's very frustrating. But at the same time, there's hope because we have a new regime that's coming in. And I just shudder to think if the election did not turn out the way it did. So I'm hopeful. I believe we need to be very cautious in moving forward. There are a lot of people that are angry about that, but as bad as it is, it could be a lot worse. The man could be reelected, could have been reelected.
I think it's important to understand that Trump didn't create racist America. racist America created Trump. And if we just focus on Trump, we'll miss the lessons that's being learned. He's not the first person to like act in this manner. Another important notice is that like while he's in office, and that's just a couple more weeks, you know, the president or the vice president had the immunity from being criminally charged or, you know, liable for any lawsuits until they get out. So I think the focus should start to shift onto the Biden administration, because the Biden administration is the one that, you know, was in fifth place in the primaries, and it wasn't until the black vote catapulted him to the top and then rode that wave through the general election, you know, garnering over 87% of the black vote to become president. And then when he becomes president, you know, his focus is on other groups than the black people that put him in the office. But another thing he said is like he's coming to heal this country, right? I think the issue is that, you know, like you can't find a common ground between everything. Republicans speak to their base, right? Even if they don't do for their base, they speak to their base, right? Like that's the power that Trump has over his voters. When Biden said he's going to heal the nation, like what does that look like for us, right? What does that look like when you've taken people who've been aligned with like not just the right wing party, but MAGA, right? And try to satisfy their needs. Like, what does that look like for Black America? What does that look like for holding Trump accountable for some of the actions that he's done, right? You can't heal America and hold Trump accountable at the same time, right? So it's important that, you know, Trump is still president now and we still focus on Donald Trump, but we also have to start shifting this responsibility to Kamala Harris and the Biden administration, right? And like we've all spoke of like it being two Americas, right? And still in 2020, we're like, you know, I hate to say it, but we're still second class citizens. We could never do what we've witnessed, right? Not just yesterday, but like in the past week, right? You had the bombing in Tennessee, you had the Kenosha shooting who was able to get out on bail, right? Like they built prisons specifically for Black men. And I'll end by saying this. Biden had no problems, right, boosting mass incarceration and sending Black men in mass droves to prison. If he wants to heal America, I think he should start with holding the administration that's in office right now accountable.
I know that Ericka, you're having some issues with your volume. But I want you to we can hear you. You just can't hear us without the phone. So go ahead if you have a response that you want to throw in.
Okay. Yep. Okay. No, I just wanted to yeah. I just wanted to sort of piggyback off of what Karen and Ibrahim said. You know, one of the things that I think is important as a part of this conversation is to make sure that we focus on the issues, right? So regardless of who the president is, right? Of course, right now we're talking about Trump because, as I said before, it is the blueprint for so many things that are wrong in this country. Systemic racism, the need for power, the constant, you know, the insatiable want for greed, you know, more, racism, all of the isms. And so I can't say this enough that when people watch this, I want to make sure that we restate the fact that we sort of have this whole litany of things that have happened during this administration that has brought a number of things to the forefront. The ugliness of this country, and trust me, there are some good things that have happened for many people, ourselves included, but we still have a long way to go. Well, one of the things that really came to mind for me was that from a human perspective, and I always like to kind of take that approach, especially as a coach, and trying to help people to figure out, how do we move around some of the stuff that has held us back from being the best that we can possibly be. So when I look at this, and I had to write it down because I was trying to think of the number of things. It's power, it's greed, it's racism, it's white privilege, it's radicalism, gaslighting, all of those things. We kind of see how they come to the surface. And the difficult part now is where you see that when you have allegiance to a particular person who is inciting a type of behavior, and you're so embedded in it and it becomes a part of who you are, at the end of the day, you then are looking for a way to get off the train when the train is off the track. And so then we have to kind of come back and figure out how to bring this thing back. And that's the thing I think, Karen, you said, unfortunately, we're in a place where I don't know what's going to happen next. And I'm still upset, Michelle. I still feel the sting of Wednesday. And so I think this conversation gives us the opportunity to release that. And hopefully others who are listening to this conversation will hear something that is insightful to say, this is not a bash against a particular president because he is Trump. It is a bash against the behavior that has brought us to the brink of this democracy becoming something that we don't recognize. So I just want to say that again, because I think it's important for this conversation.
I think too, there's one part that I want to make sure that we're bringing into the conversation. The presidency that we're dealing with right now looks nothing like any presidency that has ever gone on in the history of the United States. We have an individual in office that has their own agenda, and their agenda just does not include all people. And so we have to begin to talk about those very real things. We are dealing with systemic racism in a way that we haven't seen in nearly 45, 50 years. And in the midst of that, we have real people losing their lives. We have real people losing their jobs. We have real people that are coming back, and they are saying that regardless of how you feel, because I am a part of the accepted, I'm not treated like that. And I've had individuals come up to me that are not my nationality. And they have said, well, what's the problem? I don't understand what the problem is. Well, no, you're not going to understand the problem, and you're not going to understand what the problem is because you are not walking in my shoes. And so as we begin to really look at this, you said something yesterday, Karen, that I thought was key. Of the number of individuals in prison, tell me again what that number was that you shared with me of yesterday as it relates to our individuals of color.
Well, if you look at the entire country, African Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate 5 times the rate of whites. So we don't make up the majority of the population in the United States, but we make up the majority of those incarcerated. And I will add wrongly incarcerated for a number of reasons on a different number of levels. Either they didn't receive their due process. A white person charged with a certain crime is going to get different time than a black person. That's a fact, and so there's so many areas that work is needed in, and it can be overwhelming. And I would just encourage people to just just lend a hand where you can. A lot of times we just need to be heard and need people to understand that we're with you. We might not have a solution, but we're going to be supportive. And especially today with what's going on, it seems like every day couldn't get worse. And it does, but at the same time, we have whatever faith we can draw on, but we need to support each other. And I think that at this time, we all need to unite and be supportive of each other and help out when we can. I think that unfortunately, the situation with COVID makes us more divided.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who don't have access to technology, don't have access to Zoom or to internet, are really left out in the dark. And so we know that what's happening with the kids in the school system, a lot of them are not even being educated. And so I think on one hand, Trump uses these diversions to keep us away from focusing on the things that affect our community directly.
And I totally agree with that statement. I was watching last night, I was watching Channel 13 here in Indy, and there was on a show called The Journey to Justice. And they had 3 different families on there of individuals who children or family member was either killed by the police or severely injured by the police. And Kanosh, that incident, his father and sister were on the show last night. And it was the same theme across the board. Yes, it happened. There's nothing we can do to change it because it's already happened. But now we have to begin to dismantle the things that are not working and come up with viable solutions to insert in those places that are working. And we have to stop with the concept that it can't be changed. It's been like this for I don't know how long. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, something in the system is broke. When you can have a man spend 26 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Something in the system is broke when a cop is not charged with excessive force when he shoots a young man 7 times in the back and leaves him paralyzed. Something in this system is broke. And we can't keep moving around and talking as if that's not a reality. Yes, there is the opportunity for us to be able to step into the situation, and each of us has a platform. And each one of us has a platform that we can begin these conversations and prepare the individuals that are going to have an opportunity to get into the rooms where the decisions are made and to speak their voice. The one thing that I can say positively that came out of Wednesday's fiasco is that we got to see what possibly could happen and how bad it can get. And so for those of us that take the mindset and the position, it ain't happening to me, it's not happening to my people, so I ain't got nothing to do with it. We've got to stop that mentality, because I'm one of those Black mothers that had to have that conversation with her Black sons about coming home from an encounter with the police. But my white counterpart doesn't have to have that conversation. So I know it's not fair, and I know it's not right, and I know it is my reality, but it's a reality that has to change. And until we start demanding that the changes be made, nothing's going to change. And we have to do it on a local level. If we are unhappy with the way that a senator or a representative in Washington voted, then we've got 2 years to vote him out. And trust me, we can do what the sister girl did in Georgia and get them right on up out of there. Because they cheated her out of a governor position, and she stole the election from them the next major election. It was because of her grassroots work that she did to get individuals to go and to believe in the democratic process again, registering them to vote, that Georgia is now a blue state instead of a red state. So in regards to the changes that need to be made, where do we begin? I know I've said my part, but where do you think we need to begin?
I'll probably jump in. I think from like now to then it's just like a natural progression and things like it, even as America changed, Black life in America hadn't changed pretty much. So we got police now that evolved from slave patrols. We mostly live in ghettos that evolved from slave quarters, right? Our wealth level is pretty much still the same. I think we've been doing politics backwards, right? So even when you point to Georgia,
Okay, I want to back you up. When you say we've been doing politics backwards, what are you meaning?
so we vote on individuals, but we don't vote on agendas, right? So we galvanize around people, right? We galvanize around Obama. We galvanized around not just Biden, but like getting Trump out of the White House, but we never pushed the agenda. So here's an example, like so Obama do DACA, right? That was done through executive order, the largest executive order ever done, right? He'll do the Equality Act. He'll do the AAPI through executive order as well. But then when it comes to Black America, he'll say, I'm not the president of Black America, I'm the president of all America. And like for most of us, that'll suffice, right? And we'll take those voices that are like countering that and saying, no, we need a Black agenda, like Cornel West and Tavis Smiley, and we'll like move them through the side. Like the critical mass of Black voters is extremely apolitical when it comes to like what government can do for you and how that can change your life, almost instantaneously. So
So,
when you look at it,
jump in again. I'm gonna jump in again. Okay, so the statements that you're making, I'm totally in agreement with. Totally in agreement with. However, at some point in time, we've got to start introducing relevant solutions of what that needs to look like. And this is why I'm saying that. I'm saying that because if I've only been taught to vote based on the individual that's going into the office, I've never learned what it looks like to vote based off of policy and agenda. And so, what does that need to look like in order for my people to be educated to understand the difference?
When you start with the vote, you already lost, right? Like the way you get civically engaged happens way before the vote, right? It's actually like something you do like daily, like 365, right? You're engaging your local politicians, you're feeding them data, you're feeding them the needs of the community, and this goes all the way up the chain to the POTUS. Blacks have been taught like, you show up on voting day and you vote because your ancestors fought for the right to vote. But we never have really been educated on like the meaning of the vote and like what's supposed to culminate up until voters day, right? And like people who go to school board meetings or city county meetings, like you'll see how empty the room is. But then on a Super Tuesday, you'll go to the election polls and everybody's there, right? And if you're not there, you're getting bullied to be there, right? I just don't think like, and this is the work that ADOS has kind of like set out to do, right? Give people a political education starting where our people is at and understanding them that we don't work for politicians. Politicians are supposed to work for the people, right? We kind of go into like how we vote as well, like choosing from options that's already there. Options that people that doesn't live within our community has set out for us that doesn't benefit our community, that benefits other communities, right? We have to push our agenda and be willing not to vote for certain individuals if that agenda is not pushed, right?
Okay, I'm
Um,
gonna jump in again because I see Ericka is wanting to share something. Go ahead, Ericka. Okay, now I can't hear you. Do you have your volume off? No, I can't hear you at all now. No. Why don't you go off and come back on? Okay. While she's dealing with her thing, I'm gonna jump in and let Karen pick up and see if there's something that she had to say before we get back to you. Because I want to make sure that we understand what it is that we're dealing with. So Karen, go ahead.
I agree with you, Ibrahim. I think that for a lot of people, the issue is day-to-day living. It's like if I don't have a job, if I don't have food to eat, if I don't have a way to get my transportation to transport my kids back and forth, and now with COVID, if I don't have internet connection, so that my kids are just languishing. So I think that ideally, people that have all those things, then they can look into the quality of what of what you're referring to, meaning what does this person stand for instead of what does the person look like, or do I like this person because they look good or they sound good, or I know that they're an athlete, or I know that they are an entertainer. And so I think that based on my experiences working with people is that they're that voting is not an everyday thing, and when it comes up, it's so foreign. It's not something that we've raised our children to be conscious of, most of us, because those of us who are suffering that are lower income is just getting day by day, and it's, I mean, so
It's
that's
never
my
been made.
response.
Yeah, it's never been made to be important. I'm gonna say it like this because I feel what you're saying, Karen. Um, in high school, we get government and U.S. history our junior year or our senior year, depending on what your class schedule is looking like. That's it. We are not taught about the electoral information. We are not really discussing what it looks like for those agendas to begin to deal with this on a local level. We're not taught that. And so the reason that we are in the place that we are in now, it's partly because after the 60s civil rights, we got comfortable.
Yeah.
We were living good. We were making decent money. We are driving decent cars. We have status. We have nice homes. And we got comfortable.
Yeah.
And so now we're in that position to where now we're having to deal with this because we did not educate ourselves along the way.
And that's what can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Technology is wonderful when it works. But anyway, so yeah, so that's what I wanted to piggyback on, because I said this on my live the other night, and it was, we are in a unique position right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to decide, and I do believe that we're here for a reason. And I think part of that reason is to address all the things that we've been saying to this point. Will they all be fixed in our lifetime? I would love to say yes, but I don't know the answer to that. But what I will say is that, yes, that's our history. We weren't taught to be passionate about, how to connect with the candidate. Is it based on more than just the name or the look, or I can identify with, President Obama because he was the first Black president, and oh, I'm a Black woman. But so all of that is our history, yes. And what I think about right now is that it is the right time for us to change what that looks like, right? So yes, we weren't taught this, and we didn't learn this in school, and we didn't get it from our, whatever the case may be. But now it is up to us to say, well, let me connect with the candidate and see what the issues are, and how does this represent me, and what does it mean for me, so that we are more educated about showing up to the polls, and that it's not just a ceremonial duty or our civic duty, but it is because this is a cause that I believe in, or because this is the person. And I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not affiliated with party lines. Yes, I have a classification on my voter registration card, but if I go down and I see, okay, this candidate, this is what he or she is about, and I don't agree with that, even if it's somebody in my own party, then I'm going to make a different choice.
Exactly.
Incumbent upon us to teach, beginning with our own children, how to make informed decisions about how we're showing up to the polls, not just that we're showing up.
So I want to go back to Ibrahim. Did I say that right?
Ibrahim.
Okay. I want to go back to you because I know it's the work that you are doing now. But how can we magnify that work and duplicate it in a way that it's getting to our families, so that, and trust me, I know that having dinner at the table at the same time in the evening times is a thing of the past, even though my kids were forced to do it when I was raising them. But there are times when parents have conversations with their kids. There are times when we are imparting important information to our children. So how can we take the platform on which you stand and begin to simplify it to be able to have it replicated in the various households so that we're all speaking the same language at the same time?
The best way that I've seen to do it is to use the data, right? Like, people have to understand the American in which they live. Like, this is the American of 2020. There was a study that came out a couple of years ago that said by 2053, this is pre-COVID-19, by 2053, Black households will have a zero household wealth, right? The median Black household will have a zero household wealth. Right now, we're at 1,700 when you minus the car and the couch, right? Appreciation has that. You have to like instill this data into the kids to let them understand, like there's always been two Americas, but now, and especially after quantitative easing and just all of the policies, the Trump tax cuts, like, white America is looking at $100 trillion, right? While Black America is looking at like a little over, somewhere between $2-3 trillion. This is like almost $100 trillion gap between the two groups, right? You can't live in America and live off the work that your hands produce when everybody else is living through generations and generations of inheritance, right? So somebody talked earlier about the rat race and how we can't, I mean, not how we can't get involved, but how we are distracted because, our needs are not met, right? But this is pivotal to our survival, right? With a wealth gap this big, the only way it can be changed is through transformative government, right? So, and we always advocate for reparations. Like, reparations is essential, right? For people who not only built the land, but those descendants are still here, and we're suffering because we live in a capitalistic society that's taken its resources and provided for everybody else, and they're still trying to do that as we like get squashed under the thumb of like what capitalism and white supremacy produces. So I think you have to start with the data, right? If the data doesn't work, if their own lived experiences doesn't work, if the communities and the things in which they live and just poor healthcare and like one way I like to tell people, because even when you use the incarceration rate, right, sometimes it doesn't hit home, right? Because people say a lot of times, right, those people shouldn't commit the crime, right? Even though we get disproportionately policed and locked up and things of that reason, right? So I like to point to the maternal mobility rate, right? Because there's nothing a Black woman can do, right, that would give her a better chance to live through having giving birth to her child, or give her child a better chance, right? This only can be affected, right, through government policy, right? And like in every economic letter and like banking, politics, housing, like you just name it, in every upward mobility category, we are at the bottom and we are suffering, right? And it can't be this do for self. So King once said, like, we either go up together or we go down together. And I just think we have to get back to a we instead of a I.
Okay, I agree with that, but I want to go back to something you said. You talked about a transformative government. What are you meaning when you use that word?
I mean, reparations to American descendants of slave and a black
You,
agenda to all black Americans, specifically reparations. None of this happens without reparations. Like, we can't be here for the generations that we've been here and not have anything and then try to survive as like bottom caste and people that's been locked out economically in America. And I don't think people understand like the numbers that undergird white America, right? I mean, like when you look at it, we have like 18 million black families. Only 350,000 of those black families is even worth $1 million, right? The bottom 50% is worth less than the dollar combined, right? The top 20% carries 85% of black wealth, right? When you look at white America, like 15%, that's 13 million homes, is worth more than $1 million, right? Like, this is enough people to fill up all of New York City and the surrounding areas. It doesn't work without reparations. And how it end on this note: when government passes policies, those policies have a budget to them, right? When Trump says in week one he's gonna open up pathway to citizenship for millions of immigrants and illegal immigrants in this country, that comes with a multi-trillion-dollar hat
right,
on budget.
that.
Yeah, and so it can be done. And as we move through Corona, we've seen it done multiple times with the stimulus checks, right? So like, this is something that can happen, and this is something we have to demand for our vote. I don't know if we get it with the Biden administration because we've already put him in the office without demanding anything, but it's never too late to push.
So I have a question, and I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. Are you saying when you say we can't get it without reparations, are you saying we can't change the generational wealth gap and that's the only way we can get there? Is that what that comment means?
Yes, there's a professor named Dr. William Darity from Duke University, and he does a bunch of studies. A couple good ones is Umbrellas Don't Make It Rain and the 10 Myths to Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. And they pretty much compiled all the numbers, and like we're so far gone, right, with this $100 trillion gap right now, that the only entity big enough, right, to put us where we need to be is government. Like, there's no amount of education, hard work, starting your own business, do for self, right? Like that time has come and gone.
So Karen, were you going to say something?
I can wait.
No, go ahead.
I am 100% behind reparations. My concern is, if I've never been taught how to handle money and you give me money, then it's going to go out the door. I
Right.
mean, the people that have money, the studies show that people that win the lottery, most of them end up broke. Those are white people, black people, mostly white people, I'm assuming. And that's not to say that we shouldn't fight for reparations, because we should. And there are so many other issues that we have as Black people, as people in general, but specifically Black people, when we do have special needs, when we have autism, when we have dementia, when we are transgender, which is not a mental health issue, it's a preference. And so we have, just being Black, just by itself is an issue. But when we have these other issues that pile on top of that, it just complicates life. I have two Black sons, and I can't get to talking about voting because I'm trying to teach them how to not get arrested. I'm trying to teach them that they need to stay in school, because at this point, this is the best way to get to being independent, self-sufficient, and quote happy, whatever they define that to be. And so from that perspective, dealing with family members who've had all the things I just named, and we're talking immediate family, mother, father, sister, brother. That's what I'm talking about. So for me, I don't have assistance. There's nobody helping me with my autistic son. I can't get the help that I need because, for one thing, a lot of people don't even know what's wrong with their kid. If you want to call it what something's wrong, and we need help, we need assistance. So I'm kind of at the grassroots level, and struggling. And now I'm somebody who did go to college, who did go to law school, and I'm still at this point where I'm trying to stay above water. And so I realized if that's my situation, then imagine other people who don't have those even though have those skills. I did, as I said yesterday, I was working in the prison for a year, and being Black, being a person of color is just one obstacle. There are a lot of people in prison that have special needs, academic needs, which is why a lot of them are in prison, because those needs weren't identified or addressed. And so that's my experience. So that's where I'm coming from. And I have to admit, the voting issue, it wasn't on the forefront, because I'm just getting them to the point where they can survive and feel proud about being Black men in this community.
And I'm going to jump in right quick, and then I'm going to let you go, Ericka. I have to agree with that, because as I sit and I think about raising my own children, and it was the thing that was important to me was to make sure that they got to school every day, make sure that there was food on the table, and make sure that they had some semblance of a happy home life. And so as we are raising our kids, I mean, we can go back and we can say what our parents didn't do, what our grandparents didn't do, all yada, yada, yada. But when I listen to the young people talk today, because my oldest son is 33, and when I see him talking to my daughter, and they're talking about, he's talking about stocks, telling her what stocks she needs to have. You know, he's having the conversation with her that I didn't know enough about to have with them when they were growing up. So the conversations on some level are happening. It's not that they're not happening. They are happening, but it's on such a small level that it's not overall. It's almost the same thing as here in Indianapolis. And I hate to even say this nationally, but here in Indianapolis, when the pandemic hit and they shut everything down, we had kids from March until June that could not go to school. They were not able to eat. They were not able to even go online because IPS did not have the structure in place to make sure that they were able to learn if they were in a poor area. Some of them didn't have internet. A lot of them, and IPS did not have the laptops to be able to give out to every child. And so there were some things that they had to create a foundation to get over the summer to make sure that when they went back to school for the next school year, it was there. And so when you're dealing with the disparity that you talked about, the wealth disparity, that wealth disparity creates an atmosphere of I'm just trying to survive. Simply put, I'm just trying to survive. So how do we, understanding that in a lot of the homes, these conversations are not going to happen because mama may be working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table.
Can I respond to the financial literacy part? When you take data from the Federal Bureau, what you find out is Black families spend 37% on food. 37% on housing, 16% on food, 16% on transportation. And if you got any money left, the rest of that money goes to insurance. So it's not like we're out there squandering our money. Another thing is we don't have wealth. So when you hold for incomes, Black family in the same class as white families save more money and spend more money on education. when you talk about reparations, it's not a one-time payment. It's been like dumbed down to think it's a one-time payment. When you compare it like to the Jews, right? This is a multi-generational project, right? That's not only just like a check or a one-time check. It's multiple checks throughout your lifetime. It's programs, investment in infrastructures, education, maybe some tax-free incentives. Like there's a bunch of things that come into this. I think what we do, like when we hear about it, our natural reaction is to just shut it down, right? By thinking of ways like it couldn't go right. If you do it right, it lifts the bottom cast up, that most of us come from, right? If you come
Okay.
from.
I just had a comment that I really need to put this up because it speaks to what you're saying. And so I'm putting that up. So just from, and I've heard this, I've heard that stated out of people's mouths. That very statement. And I want to say that is the mindset. And all that you're saying is great. And I'm in total agreement with what you're saying. I understand the concept, have talked about it till I'm blue in the face. But until we educate our people, until we get the information out there, until we find a means in which to do so, we'll be having these same conversations 10 years from now. Because we will not have risen out of our current situation. We'll still be dealing with the Trumps of the world. We'll still be dealing with the domestic terrorism mindset. We have to, one of the things that I learned is a very simple thing that I was taught in church. And the scripture goes like this: let this mind be in you that is also in Christ Jesus. It's transforming the mind.
Yes.
It's teaching in order to transform. And if we educate with the intent to transform the mind, then we open people up to possibilities that they have never even thought were possible. And so that's what I'm talking about when I make that statement. I'm wanting us to really begin to think that at some point in time, we believe that we had to deal with this because this is just the way it is, because there's two different Americas that we live in. There's the white America, and then there's the people of color America. Well, I choose not to hold that mindset any longer.
Yeah.
And so as I decide that I'm going to transform my mind, that means that I need to be educated. So I need people like you, Mr. Tanner, to educate me on what it needs to look like on a dummy level until I can grow up to your level of how I need to transform my mind through education so that I can begin to demand from my politicians that they have an agenda that benefits my community.
The first thing we have
I'm sorry.
No, go.
No, I was just the reason I asked the question in the beginning is because I feel like I do agree that we need to understand. I saw somebody's comment to say the stimulus check is not reparations. There it is right there. So I'm looking at the same thing. So yes, to be educated on, well, what does it really mean when we say that? I do feel like that's important. But the reason I ask the question is because the mindset would say, oh, is this the only way that I'm going to come up out of the place that I'm in or the place that I've been taught to be in for a really long time? Or is there some shift, Michelle, to your point, in how I need to think about money, how I need to think about, well, what does wealth look like? And how I need to think about, is there a path that I can take parallel while I'm understanding what does this really mean? So that's why I wanted to throw that out there, because I guess in my mind, what I would say to my children is, okay, well, let's understand what this looks like. But in the meantime, while we're trying to understand what reparations means and how it benefits us as a people, I don't want you to just sit back and wait for that. Right? From my perspective, I'm going to teach you, okay, well, here's what it means to be able to create something for yourself. Here's, how we need to change the dynamic of what we understand money to be, and to move out of the different ways that we've been taught to think about money. So I wanted to ask that question because in my mind, it's sort of like it's a parallel effort, so that we don't sit back and wait for somebody to give us something, because then,
we'll be right back in the same shape we in right now.
Exactly.
I think
know we're kind of putting you on the spot. I get that.
This is good. This is good. I think first we have to look at just like, you can't give me anything that you owe me. Reparations isn't a gift. This is like work that we've put in, right? There's a debt owed to us, right? Not only that, our communities was pillaged, right? Every generation, it was something that was taken from us, right? For 400 years, right? Another thing is that I would say the first thing you do in like educating people is you have to disaggregate the data, right? We think of America as like white, and then it's been this new term named POC. But when you look at the data up until 1965, 99.3% or more of Black people in America came from slavery, came from like those killing fields of the South. This POC is something new. They haven't witnessed the traumatic legacy that we've endured, and therefore they don't have the barriers, right? So when you look at data like the Color of Wealth from LA, you'll see that the median household wealth for a white family is like, I think it's like 350, right? Matter of fact, let me check. It's 355,000. When you look at Chinese, it's 406,000. When you look at Japanese, it's 592,000. When you look at Asian Indian, it's 460,000, right? When you look at African Black, it's 72,000. And when you look at Black, like, we're less than $10,000, and 200 of that is liquid, right? So there's something specific that's happened to this group. And when you POC it, you mash everybody in there, and it keeps us at the bottom. And it's like what they did with affirmative action when they moved it from race-based and through gender.
That when you POC it, what does that mean?
When you put our legacy in with people of color.
Okay.
Right, like nobody was lynched and hosed down and
raped, forced to work,
and just like how we endured all this and still endure this, right? Like, Black men being 13% of the American, 5% of the American population, but over 40% of American prisons. Like, nobody has endured this. The first thing to do is disaggregate the data. And then the second thing to do is explain to your children, like, what we do as parents, because I'm a parent too, like, you don't just provide for the present, you also try to make a way for the future, right? Political work, reparations, like that's laying out that foundation for the future. And without it, there is no tomorrow. And that's what we're seeing now as we try to navigate through COVID, right? For a lot of us, there is no tomorrow because we didn't get the things we needed to even be able to navigate through a pandemic, right? We don't know how long we'll be here, right? I mean, it's good to like teach kids like 401k talk and stocks and bonds and things of that nature. But when you have white baby boomers transferring $68 trillion to Xers and millennials and Generation Z, like how do you compete with that? There is no competing, right? Big bank tanks little bank. So you'll amass this wealth, and just like going broke from the ESPN document, you end up broke because you never had the type of money that would allow you access into what real America is, right? And real America is like being at the top and being a shark, and you just eat the guppies, right? 70% of Black males born into the middle class will fall out before they're adults, right? So even when you think about this, like do for self, and I'm not saying don't do it, right? You have to get up and work and put food on the table, but you also have to have like a strong plan B, right, on what your child's future is and your grandchildren's future is, and as we've seen with COVID-19, what your future may be.
Okay, so in essence, what you're saying is we have to learn how to be legacy minded. We have to think about our financial legacy and our social legacy that we are leaving behind, even that we are living in front of them so that they can mimic it as they move forward in the lives that they have. I think for as the basis, if we don't get anything else from the conversation that we had tonight, the basis is we need more education. We need to be educated on the things that are important to our community so that when we do go to vote, when we do consider our legacy, when we do make these national decisions, that we do it in a way that we are empowering our young people to step into the greatness of who they are and then do it with their people as they go from generation to generation. Ericka, you have to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that, because I know we started the conversation with, what happened on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And I think that this latest incident, the George Floyd incident, the recent election that we've come through, I feel like, and maybe this is sort of like my brain is like, okay, we have to get to a better place than where we are right now. But I feel like there have been some pivotal moments that have opened our eyes to how we can influence change. And I think it's important for us to look at each of these pieces and say, oh, and I think somebody said it in the chat, like we do have a voice. Mm-hmm. And I think that these last 12 months, last 4 years have shown us how important it is for us to exercise that. I can tell you, I think we were talking about this a couple minutes ago, but I have a 21-year-old daughter and I have a 12-year-old son. So yes, I've had to have the conversation with my son that, as mothers and fathers, we have to have with our Black children, especially our Black boys. My daughter in this, and even my son, because of everything that's been happening, their awareness of activism and being connected to issues, mm-hmm. Ibrahim, is what you were talking about earlier, it has become very present for them. So going back to the whole education point, each of these things that have happened are like domino effects. And part of it is, at the end of all this, is our responsibility to see how influential our voice is and how much we need to be a part of the conversations in things that are meaningful for us, for our families, for our community. So I think
Ericka, hold on one second. Uh-huh. I want to go back to something that you just said, because I think this is key. Half of the time we don't realize that we have a voice. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we need to understand that we have a voice just like everybody else. Yes. We have a voice and we need to use it. Mm-hmm. We need to be in the rooms, having the conversations to make sure that we are educating ourselves, mm-hmm. so that we can thereby educate others. Yes. Because all the time, education does not come through me sitting in a classroom and you teaching me.
Yes.
Right? Most of the time when I learn because I'm watching somebody else do whatever it is that I'm trying to learn how to do. Mm-hmm. And when we learn how to walk it out, when we learn, I want to go back to something that I saw this summer. I am friends with Ericka on Facebook. I don't know how we became friends, but we're friends on Facebook. And there was something that she started a series with her daughter where they began to talk about the issues that were facing our community. And they mimicked what they saw off of a TV show that was decided to be socially conscious. When I say mimicking what I'm seeing, that's what I'm talking about. because we don't always have to sit down in a forum of a classroom or facilitate a workshop to teach. We just got to get up off of our butts and get out there and start doing the work. And
with
if I don't know,
right, with what we know,
and what I don't know, I need to get with some people that know so that I can learn and thereby step into it. So, Ericka, finish your thought.
No, I mean, I think it basically just saying, this is a time that we all can use to say, what do I do with this? Now that we've been in this tumultuous place for a really long time and we all want to get out, and I'm looking at the comments and somebody said, we're not in a good place.
Right.
Angry, frustration, hurt, all of that. And so we have to feel that because that's our human emotion. But then we also have to say, all right, so now what do I do? Is it more education? Is it understanding more about, what reparations means and how we need to get what we're owed? Is it understanding what to do with, money and how to create generational wealth and how to, what resources do we need to tap into to make sure that we're not just leaving this moment or sitting in this moment in our anger and our frustration. And Michelle, I think that was, I appreciate and applaud you for pulling this together, because I think that's where we need to be. Like right now, sitting in this, the emotions that we're in, what do I do with this and how do I use it for good so that I can transfer that energy into something that's going to benefit those that are close to me for generations to come and for the present.
I want to say this because you just made me think of something. Back when I want to say maybe Trump was in office for less than 6 months, I peeped his game.
You what?
I peeped his game.
Oh.
Anytime he would go mad on Twitter, something was happening in the House and the Senate that he was trying to deflect. He was trying to get your attention to go over here instead of paying attention to what was going on over there. Wednesday was another case of that. He got us all worked up into a frenzy and angry about the attack on the Capitol. That we stop paying attention to the important things. Because now I'm angry, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, and I'm tired of this, and this has got to quit. And it's not until you get down to see what's really up under the surface that we can start dealing with what our real issues are. As a community, we need to be educated on how to be better at this thing called life. And it's going to look different from person to person. But it needs to happen. Go ahead, Karen.
I just wanted to also echo what Ericka and Ibrahim said, and also, Michelle, to commend you because this is free. And there's so many resources that are out there at this stage for those of us who do have a connection to the internet so that we can get the information. And the beauty of this forum is that everyone's coming from a different perspective so people can listen in. And I think that the important thing is I'm going to support everybody that's here, even though we might have a different way of going about it. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we all want what's best for our people and for all people at the end of the day. And so I think that the people that are listening in and watching, they should be commended because they are trying to educate themselves and they have contacts. And so everybody gets information differently. And I think that at the end of the day, if we all support each other, even though we have different ways of going about it, we all have the best of intentions. And that's what's most important. We all want what's best for our people.
Yeah. And it is what we want for our people. And Ibrahim, you said something that just came back to my mind. And as you were giving out the statistics of what that looks like and all of that, it made me think of something when I used to work in IPS. One of the things, the statistics that bothered me the most that I had learned is that they take attendance. You know how they do this mass attendance after kids have been in school for like 5 or 6 weeks. They do this attendance. And they take this attendance and then they take it out by race and then they take it out by gender. Then they take it out by economical status, by all of that. They break it out. But one of the most important numbers that they have is the number of males that are in the 3rd grade. And it is that number that they determine how many prisons that they need to have functioning by the time they are 18. And so it's just as deep as that. And if nobody else gets anything else from this conversation, in order to ensure that the one that belongs to us, does not make it into one of those prisons that they took attendance when they were in 3rd grade to put them in, to make sure that doesn't happen, then we need to start these conversations in our homes. We need to start them within our communities. And then we need to figure out what it needs to look like to support each other. Because you are absolutely right. We cannot take the mindset that it's all about me. Because we were created to be in relationship with each other.
Yes.
And as such, I can't be who I am without you, and you can't be who you are without me. So understanding that, I get what mine is mine and what's yours is yours, but when we come together, we are a much greater force to be reckoned with. And whereas I may be missing the point, you may understand the point, and then you can bring it in and say, "No, Michelle, you missed that. Let me show you what this is really about. Let me tell you what he's really saying without actually saying the words. Let me hip you to the game, and let me let you know and be able to peep him out for yourself." And it's those type of things that we need to come together on. And I'm going to take a few minutes and let each of you give your final thoughts before we go off. So I'm going to start with you, Karen. You have any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
Well, again, I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm watching the comments, and I appreciate all of the people, all the comments, and the suggestions, and the hope. I think at the end of the day, we have to have hope and have to support each other, and stay in it for the long haul. And the most important thing, as you said, is there's no me without you. And as much as we try to act like that, for those that do believe that, we just need to put our hand around their arm around their shoulder and bring them back in. And I think that more of these conversations need to happen, definitely. And the more we talk about it, the more solutions will come up, because more people have input, the more suggestions, more ideas we have. So I just appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Ibrahim.
I would quote Cornell West and saying, like, we have to get back to community, but you have to love Black people, not because they love you back, but because they are deserving to be loved. So we have to, get rid of that I mentality and get back into we. None of this stuff happens without community. We do have to get educated, but we have to weaponize that education around race and around the needs of our community. I appreciate you having me on this platform. Thank you.
Ericka?
I think I will say what I said before, and that is we are in a ripe position. That means we get to take the things that we've experienced. We get to take all the emotions that we feel, and we get to shift that into something that will be productive for us as a people, for our communities. And I think we need to be the example of how to do that for those who are outside of our race and our communities, because I think others need to see what is possible through what we bring to the table. And it's not easy to do because of how we feel and because of how we've been treated. But I think we are in a unique position to be the change that we want to see. And I know it sounds cliche, but I believe it's true. And I think this is the time for us to begin to shift the narrative and to try to move forward in a positive way, one step at a time, because it's not going to happen overnight. But conversations like this starts to get us moving in that direction.
I want to thank each of you for accepting my invitation to come on to the show. I knew what I had in mind. And that was to begin the conversation. You know, one of the things that I grew up in a two-parent household where both of my parents are ministers. So when you had conversations, you had conversations. It wasn't a plaything. And so most of our conversations centered around our dining room table. After you got through eating, we'd sit back a little bit and start talking. And we would have those conversations. I think because we have become such a busy society, and we do not do the things that support the family as a unit and as a whole, that we've lost our sense of community. And in losing our sense of community, we've really lost our sense of self, because we are not doing the things that are benefiting our community as we go after the things that are only going to benefit us. So if nothing else, we started it with the events on Wednesday, and then we broke it down to understand that we need to come together as a community, and we need to begin having these conversations on a regular, so that we can be educated, not only to the political process, but also on what we need to be doing on a community level to begin to effect change here. Because we've seen it done. We saw it done in Georgia. We've seen it done in other places throughout the United States, in spite of the things that have been going on politically around us. And so we cannot allow the misbehavior of one individual to create a mindset that we just throw in the towel on all of it. I was always taught that if you are not a part of the solution, then you are a part of the problem. And so we'll close out this broadcast by saying this: choose your side. Are you going to be a part of the solution, or are you going to be a part of the problem? You make the choice. So this is your girl, Michelle, with Girls Talk Real Talk, because when girls and guys talk, information is disseminated. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you for my guest co-host and for this panel who has shared some very important information. And if nothing else, it should have educated you and transformed your thought process to really understand what is important about what's going on politically and socially within our community. So you all be blessed, and we'll see you again the next time on Girls Talk Real Talk. Bye-bye.